So what's good, YouTube? So before we get into the actual issue from number 14, I'm going to explain what I'm doing. I'm going to be doing my little interpretation of Civil War, of the Civil War comic event in Marvel. But I don't want to do it like everybody else, so I'm going to be doing sort of like reading a few issues or going over a few issues of Black Panther, Captain America, and Ms.Marvel, all of whom were involved in the Civil War event. And I'm going to be showing sort of what happened to them, what those characters were doing before Civil War actually started. And you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see sort of how they evolved over the course of the event, especially Captain America. So I'm just going to get right into it. This is Black Panther issue number 14. It's called The Bride. It involves, in a nutshell, it involves him marrying Storm, to make a long story short. But the story itself is very interesting, and I think it kind of shows a different side of T'Challa. So here it goes. So at the beginning of issue 14, we see T'Challa flying over Wakanda in a small aircraft, and he seems unsettled that he's doing it by himself. He thinks about how even though he has all of the luxuries that come along with being a king, it doesn't fill a void inside of him. It dawns on him that the path he currently flies on is the same path he took when he was a young Wakandan warrior still testing his abilities. The same path that led him to Storm eventually. It's at this moment that he seems to immediately fall in love with her. You see, Black Panther has been looking for love for a while by now already, and this mini event represents T'Challa finally being able to go back home to Wakanda to find his bride. You see, he had previously been in the United States a few issues before this. I think it was like for maybe 3 or 4 issues before issue number 14. You know, helping Luke Cage, Monica Rambeau, and Blade deal with some enemies in the United States. But now, you know, he's back in Wakanda. And there's even a flashback from 2 days prior, before him getting to Wakanda, where, you know, we see T'Challa and Luke Cage talking about Storm and how she turned down Luke Cage, I guess, when he tried to court her himself. And he seems like he still hasn't really gotten over that. Then T'Challa, you know, shares this story about how deeply connected his family is with hers. He tells this really amazing and somewhat random story about how Malcolm X met his father T'Chaka in the 60s on a trip to Africa to meet heads of state, you know, different heads of state. With him came a woman named Harriet Monroe, who had a son named David. Just bear with me, folks. Years later, after Malcolm X's assassination, the young boy David returns to Africa and meets a Kenyan princess named Nadare, or Nadar, or however you pronounce it. I may be butchering that. The two of them marry, and they have a child named Aurora Monroe. T'Challa met her after her parents died, and she went on the run eventually, becoming a goddess figure among a group of desert nomads before being recruited by the X-Men. So fast forward to the present, and we continue to see T'Challa flying over towns and homes in Wakanda, and he's questioning himself. You know, he questions, you know, why Storm. He realizes he can choose literally any woman he wants, being that he's the king. So why her? He thinks about how their initial attraction was all-consuming and how they were inseparable and had many adventures together. He found her to be tough, smart, courageous, and principled for a thief. He thought about how there could really only be one thing that could tear their young union apart, and that was the murder of his father, Ulysses Claw. And that's basically what ends up happening. He feels like he's not doing his duties as the soon-to-be king by letting his father's killer roam the earth alive. He abandoned Storm and is now on a desperate attempt to make up for his past mistake. So we then find ourselves in modern-day Sudan, where some enslavers have captured a group of Sudanese women. they debate what to do with them. Then all of a sudden, Storm arrives and easily deals with them. But she's not alone. You see, there's a guy in the storm that is pretty much unseen. And that person is Wolverine. And he makes a really brief appearance in what was already a lopsided battle to begin with. So, the storm clouds clear and hope shines from the air as the survivors thank Storm for her help, referring to her as divine. It's then that we realize that Wolverine wasn't exactly invited. He says he's there to watch Storm's back, basically, as she cleans up that region of enslavers and builds these, lakes in the desert. Finally, Black Panther appears, greeting Logan, who quickly leaves to give the two some time alone together. Storm talks about how this is what she always did after he left her. She'd go around dispensing justice almost like an angel of retribution, and that's why people started worshiping her. Black Panther tells her that he never really left her, because he's trying to change history here a bit, but that he just had to find his father's killer and kill him. Of course, and he did, and now he sits on the throne of Wakanda as its king. However, Storm is still kind of hurt and that T'Challa just dropped off the face of the earth and left her alone when they both really needed each other, and she says that it's too late, essentially. And in a wild, last-ditch effort to get her back, T'Challa drops to his knees and asks Storm to marry him. That if she is truthful and would have done anything for him back then she would do this. And she should do this. And that was the end of issue 14. So here we are with issue number 15. So check this cover out. Countdown to the wedding of the century, and let's begin. Issue number 15 starts with the introduction of this completely random villain known as the Arabian Knight. A villain chosen between the survivor of a duel to the death between two combatants. The Arabian Knight appears to have some type of energetic power emanating from the sword he is given. Two characters discuss how they want to use the Arabian Night to attack Wakanda because they don't like how hotly contested the region is becoming right now, attracting all sorts of foreign attention. They order an assault on the Black Panther himself and, of course, Storm. So then we see T'Challa continuing what he was doing at the end of issue 14, trying to persuade Storm to marry him, when all of a sudden Storm senses inbound fighter jets, and the two of them stop what they're doing to defend themselves. Storm summons a storm, of all things, to quickly destroy the jets while the Arabian Knight fights the Black Panther. It's here that you see how silly this villain actually is, as the Black Panther completely whoops his ass while still persuading Storm to marry him in the process. So it's funny because him and Storm are having this normal discussion while T'Challa destroys the Arabian Knight like he's nothing, essentially. Which really shouldn't come as that much of a surprise. You see, this is a king who has fought many more dangerous foes other than this guy. So the Arabian Knight is destroyed, and T'Challa and Storm go back to his aircraft that he found her on, or that he was flying around in issue 14 to find her. So they finally get back onto the aircraft itself, and Storm basically agrees to spend more time with him. So she's warming up to him a little bit. Likely impressed by how well he was able to defend himself, even though she likely didn't need his help anyway. So, meanwhile in Nairobi, Kenya, we see a couple of guys who appear to be plotting against Storm and T'Challa because they've been monitoring her moves across the continent, even and I mean, I'm sorry, across the continent, and even knew the Arabian Knight was going to attack her. So in some way, shape, or form, they're connected to the other guys earlier in the comic, early in the issue. What their larger scheme represents, we don't know yet. So now we see the Black Panther and Storm finally arriving in Wakanda. And this is a really great panel in the comic itself, where you see the two of them flying overhead while Wakandans cheer his arrival beside a large panther statue. So we see the two of them continue to bond, and in the midst of all of this, there's this huge celebration. You know, there's this huge celebration for the return of the Panther, who steps out of his shuttle with Storm by his side, with her hands in his. Then we see T'Challa introducing Storm to his mother, who talks about how she's been hearing about Storm for 10 years and is finally glad to meet her, which, you know, makes T'Challa feel kind of, you know, awkward. A while later, Storm and the Queen Mother, who, you know, that's the title she goes by, continue talking, and the Queen talks about how she's been following Storm's adventures for years and knows she's a warrior worthy of her son. She says that Wakandans have a warrior culture, and it takes a strong woman to lead and breed strong men. Then she asks Storm a very difficult question by asking, you know, is she willing to drop everything to be with T'Challa forever? And even though she doesn't specifically mention the X-Men, it's implied leaving them would need to be part of her decision too. So at the end of the issue, after Storm leaves the Queen Mother, she meets up with T'Challa, who is perched in a tree, and she finally agrees to marry him after, you know, he poses the question one last time, and she gives the proverbial "I do." So now at the end of issue 15, she has agreed to marry the Black Panther. They're not married yet. That hasn't happened yet. But, you know, she said yes. And so that's basically it for issue number 14 and 15. I'm probably going to try to squeeze issue 16, 17, and 18 into one video, the next video. So stay tuned for that one. And if you like the Black Panther, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and you'll be seeing more soon.